So hello, welcome. My name is Michelle Reynolds and I work for SMTJ. We promote flexible working and particularly job sharing as a way of retaining talent in the TV industry. We think it's a great way of retaining talent, all kinds of talent. Everybody should be able to have access to flexible working and a work-life balance. But this is particularly also the case for people with caring commitments like looking after kids or older relatives or people with mental or physical health issues. We are thrilled to be interviewing on this International Women's Day Dorothy Byrne. Absolutely chuffed to bits that you've joined us today, Dorothy. Thank you very much. So Dorothy is the editor-at-large at Channel 4 and also the chair of the Ethical Journalism Network. Dorothy, thank you so much for coming today.
Well, thank you for the honour of being able to speak to other women on this day.
Well, it's great, and I think I probably wasn't the only woman during your McTaggart lecture. When was it? The year before this one, who was jumping up and down. I mean, I was literally like pumping my fist, going, yes, she said it, because you said everything that we've been dealing with, and so with so much humour, but so strongly. It was bloody great speech.
Well, it was fun to do it, and I got cervical smears in.
You did, which I
as
also
well.
Yeah.
I mean, how often do you get in cervical smears, disgusting men, and the menopause?
I mean, you ticked all the boxes, literally. So that was great, and you've kind of become a sort of poster girl, I think, for women in TV, whether you like it or not. I mean, I don't know how that sits for you now.
Well, after I gave the talk, I mean, the next day was amazing. I was in Edinburgh and complete strangers, women strangers, came up and said, thank you very much for talking about sexual assault and talking about the menopause. And it's the only time I've ever been embraced by a stranger in a toilet, which was
you haven't lived, Dorothy.
Slightly odd.
I mean, everybody was sharing the speech. You know, we were sharing the text of it. We were, you know, it was wonderful. It felt like, you know, somebody in power was voicing what was happening to us. So,
well, what was interesting for me was that I was talking about my past, and several young women told me about how it's still happening now, and really distressing stories, particularly in smaller production companies. They told me that if they didn't agree to go to dinner near the end of their contract with the boss, they were worried that maybe their contract wouldn't be renewed, and they weren't always assaulted or anything like that, but they were made to feel uncomfortable. But one young woman told me that actually she in fact was assaulted very, very recently, and I mean, that was just horrible to hear, because I suppose I thought, well, I'm talking about what happened to me more than 30 years ago, and that was depressing. The other thing that happened was that I talked about racism at Granada TV when I started there in 1982, and two Black people who had worked there then, and as far as I can remember, there were only 5 or 6 in total, wrote to me and told me terrible stories of what had happened to them. And one woman wrote and said that I used to say to her, you need to be more confident at work. And she felt she couldn't tell me that one reason that she didn't feel confident was that people were always saying to her, you only got your job because you're Black. And the fact that she felt she couldn't tell me that, and how could it be she only got her job because she was black? Because of about 1,500 people, there were only 6 people who weren't white. So I don't think people were getting jobs just because they were black. But then the thing about the menopause, a woman that I know quite well, the next day after I gave the talk, I was sitting next to her in the audience, and she threw her arms around me and cried. And I said, "Why are you crying?" And she said, "Because I'm suffering so much in the menopause, and I feel I can't talk about it." And I think giving the talk contributed to Channel 4 having the first ever menopause policy of a major British broadcaster.
Absolutely, and I definitely want to come back and talk to you about that, because I think that's really interesting. I'm the women's officer for Beck2's new unscripted branch, and it's one of the things that we're really going to be talking about. So I'm definitely coming back to that. All those things you've just said, I mean, I think it's been a really rough year for Telly. And,
Yes.
I think Channel 4 is one of many of the broadcasters that's sort of taken a real financial hit because of COVID, obviously. And at the same time, we're getting, there feels to be like a kind of a collectivization at a kind of grassroots level of freelancers talking to each other, supporting, starting to speak out about things that are affecting them in the workplace. But then we get diversity stats in, I think last week or the week before, from Diamonds, showing that the number of women and people from Black and Asian minority ethnic backgrounds actually fell last year. So I suppose
very depressing.
It was really disheartening, but and I think there's something in there that, companies are having to make content, a lot of content. We went through so much content over lockdown, I think something like 2 years worth of content in 6 months. So there is this need to make shows quickly and cheaply, but how do you do that without losing the diversity of your workforce and all those kind of investment in people that they've been doing, and when suddenly you have to just churn it out? That's a bit of an awkward question, but I think it kind of feeds into a lot of the sort of stories that you were saying.
Well, it's interesting that you say that you feel that freelance people are getting together more. I sense that, and I think that broadcasters need to get together a bit more. I mean, Channel 4 doesn't make any of its own programs, not even the news, and therefore a lot of people who work for us are freelance. But as your organization has pointed out, increasingly, as the BBC and ITV work with more independent production companies, there are more and more freelancers. And my first job in TV was advertised in a national newspaper. How many people do I know now that that's how they come into TV? So I feel that as broadcasters and the big companies need to find ways of getting together more efficiently to help and support people in their career. And a lot of that goes on, but it tends to be broadcaster by broadcaster or a bit ad hoc.
Yeah.
And is there a way of us working together better? So, for example, with women that I know, when they're coming near the end of their contract, I always urge women and men, I know you're really busy, but don't be so busy that you get to the end of your contract and you haven't put your name out there and circulated your CV and all that. And to be honest, I think women are a bit more selfless. And when I say, you're going into the edit now, have you started applying for jobs? It's more likely to be a woman than a man who'll say, I'm just too busy. Yeah. And I have to go, no, you can't be just too busy. because the thing you're working on is just a TV program, and the other thing is you as a person. But then sometimes if I haven't got something, because current affairs is at Channel 4 is relatively small, then I might say send their CV to Rachel Jupp at Panorama, or Esme Wren, or Fiona Campbell is really good, Daniel Pearl is really good, you know. So I circulate these, and I know a lot of people do that, but is there a better way of doing it, you know,
across the board?
Could all the diversity officers somehow cooperate better so that we have these things of people falling in and out of the job market all the time? So they've got these gaps, and that really has a significant effect on their income over a year.
Absolutely. I mean, let's go back to sort of you know, you've spoken a lot about your early career when you were quite often the only woman in the room.
Yes.
You know, what do you think, well, what were the main challenges for you? What are the main challenges for women in a kind of, I think news and current affairs is still quite male dominated, but and sort of how did you stick at it, really?
Well, statistically it's much better. I mean, when I started on World in Action, at that point I was the only woman in the program, and that did feel odd.
I'm sure.
And you know, I've talked about one man who just said straight out, you know, will you go to bed with me? And not in a particularly unpleasant way, you know, I just said no, of course not.
You don't ask if you don't get kind of mentality.
Yeah, that was what he said. But I think a number of other people also, they were quite a bit older than me, they were really patronizing, and you know, they would have like a serious conversation, and then they would say, would you like a drink, Dorothy? You know, nice little smile. And they weren't all like that, but I felt a bit patronized.
So what made you stick at it?
But yeah, I was going to say also that they didn't think that some subjects were real subjects for current affairs. And you know, I've talked about my first film being Rape in Marriage, but I did a film about contraception, and I know that a number of the men thought, you know, why are we doing a film about whether contraception actually works, and about whether certain coils actually damage you and make you infertile? Well, if I say that to you,
yeah, I want to know that.
I think I need to know that.
Yes.
So I think that's changed. Those would now be regarded as really suitable subjects. Well, I kept going because I needed to work, and you know, I loved it. You know, I loved current affairs. People say to me, why did you stay at Channel 4 and news and current affairs for so long? And I say, because I'm a journalist, and I think Channel 4's got the best journalism. Why would I want to go somewhere else? So yeah, I really like it. But it, you know, when I had a baby, it was very hard to keep going.
Well, I was going to ask you, so you had a baby quite late in your career, and I think you said something like, you know, you just kind of forgot, and I can kind of see that. I know when I mean, you know, I was pregnant in 2012, and you know, I'd never really seen pregnant people in the office, and I was kind of seen as a bit of a kind of this freaky fat woman lumbering around the office, and I can understand, you know, why you would kind of forget. And I think in TV, you know, your career is all consuming. You know,
I worked on World in Action, which I thought was, and I still think was, the best TV investigative current affairs program.
Absolutely.
And I would go from one project to the next project. And I never gave myself enough time to think about me and my life properly. And now when I go to schools to speak, which I do quite a lot, I say to the girls and the boys, but particularly the girls, when you're planning your life, plan your whole life. Think what you would like in your whole life, in every aspect of your life, because you're going to have to plan that as well. So people will think, oh, right, if I want to get into journalism, maybe I should do an MA in journalism after I've done my degree. Maybe I should apply for a training course. Maybe I should apply for this or that promotion. But you have to think like that, especially if you're freelance, about, right, and I would also like to have a baby, because if you're freelance and you want to have a baby, that is like Hannibal planning the crossing of the Alps. You know, it's a huge thing.
It's massive.
And one of the things that I feel very strongly about is that women should talk to each other at work more about it. And I think partly older women don't, because they're in a management position and they're a bit worried that, well, they're more than a bit worried, they're very worried that if they say to younger women, you're doing very well in your career, but are you thinking about having a baby? All the alarm bells will go off.
What am I allowed to say?
What am I allowed to say? But if you start that conversation with younger women, I've found they will say, well, I don't know how I would have a baby, because I would really like to have a baby, but I also want to carry on with my job, and I can't afford a live-in nanny, and I don't know what else I would do. And the number of times I would say to people, I have said to people, childminders are a really good option. And I'm honestly not making this up. Young women have said to me, what is a childminder?
It's because we don't talk about it.
Yeah, just as I think we should have talks for everybody at work about the menopause, I think good employers should organise talks about different forms of childcare, or how does flexible working really work? You know, often to find out about flexible working, you've got to go onto your company's intranet and study it. It would be much better if every now and then there was a meeting in which older people talk to younger people about, here are different ways that flexible working can work for you. And also, young people often don't know that companies have a duty to have family-friendly policies.
Well, they do, but that tends to be for the staff rather than the freelancers.
I think some Labour MPs now, I can't remember who it was talking last week and saying, we have got to talk about this, because as more and more women are freelance, we are talking about these rights that people have if they have a staff job, and it just doesn't work. Okay. So when I got pregnant, I worked for a company that employed me for 11 months every year.
Right. Oh, so yeah, you didn't have
and then I was not employed for a month, and then another 11 months. So I never accrued any rights. Yeah. Now, interestingly, the organization that said that that was unlawful and no longer permitted was the tax man or woman. Let's not blame tax on men. HMRC said TV companies had to stop doing that. But that meant that I had my baby and I was the editor of a TV program. I didn't have any money because I had no maternity pay, but say I had saved up loads of money, if I hadn't gone back to work, I wouldn't have been the editor of that TV program.
Because how old was your baby when you went back to work?
5.5 weeks.
Yeah.
So because if you're freelance, they don't have to hold your job open for you. And to have worked hard so that I was the editor of a network television program and then throw all that away, you know.
Absolutely.
And I was a single parent, and in some ways I could afford a live-in nanny because I was the editor of a network TV program. So if I'd stopped being the editor of a network TV program and earned less money, then I couldn't necessarily have afforded the live-in nanny. So it all went in.
Wouldn't have been able to afford to work.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, we get a lot of heartbreakingly, we get a lot of women contacting us saying, you know, I'm in my late 20s, early 30s, you know, I'm kind of getting serious with my boyfriend. I'd like to have a baby at some point, but I don't know when to have a baby, asking us, when do we have a baby? Because they feel like they need to get to a certain level of work before having a child so that
and that raises another issue, which is when I talk at schools, I talk about fertility levels at different ages. And I also think employers, both for staff and freelance, men and women, should have talks, maybe 2 or 3 times a year, in which someone comes in and explains how your fertility levels work. The number of times people in their late 30s have said to me, well, I really want to establish my career. And I go, well, I mean, you'll be nearly 40. Have you tested your fertility level? Because, and they go, how do you do that? I didn't even know you could do that. And then there's a really cheap way your GP can do it, or there's a better way. All that information should be on companies' intranets. And one of the things that concerns me in my life is the number of women I know who work in TV who wanted to have babies but never did.
Yeah.
And I would liken that to China's one-child policy, because if those women had made a definite decision not to have a baby, that's fine. But I personally know several people who look back on their lives who are my age and say, I really wanted a baby, but I never worked out how to do it. And then, you know, I got pregnant and had a baby at nearly 45 using my own egg. That is not everybody's experience.
Lucky.
Yeah, and I've written about my feelings about this sort of move for employers to give staff financial support to freeze their eggs. I just think that's all round the wrong way.
Yeah.
And, you know, quite a leading woman was quoted as saying, you know, young women at an early stage in their career, they're really trying to get on, they should be given support to freeze their eggs so that they can pursue their career. And I just think...
I did a documentary about this, actually.
That is not you should be saying what's wrong with your company that a young woman feels that she has to have an unnatural procedure that doesn't have a great success rate.
That's it. It doesn't.
Carried out on her body. In
order to have a career.
In order to have a career, you've gone wrong somewhere.
Yes, I absolutely agree. And as you say, it's not proven, egg freezing, and it's expensive, really expensive. Really, I mean, so interesting. So, I mean, I think over lockdown and over COVID, freelancers have had the whole industry, whole TV industry, it's been a rough time, but freelancers, I feel, being one, that they've had.
My daughter's freelance.
She works in television as well, doesn't she?
She finished a course to train to be a production manager, which was great.
Yeah.
And she got a month's work, but she's trying to get in at the very bottom. And actually, in lockdown, because people aren't in their offices, some of those jobs where you're coming in at the very bottom and you're answering the phone and opening the door and going to get the tea, but also doing a bit of production, that they've gone.
Yeah,
they literally, that way in doesn't exist. And for other women, we know it's a statistical fact that women are bearing the brunt of childcare problems with children not going to school. I went for a walk last week with one of my friends who runs a small production company, and I said to him, "How are you, man?" I'm not blaming him for this. I'm just saying it was a real conversation. He works normally 4 days a week and his wife works 3 days a week. And he said that it was really hard. He is on the Zoom 9:30 till 6:30 relentlessly. It's the opposite to the problem of the freelance. People who are working are literally working without break often, which is an issue. And he said that his wife had just had to give up work because one of the children, the schooling was good, and the other one, the school was really not providing anything at all. His son was 14. They just couldn't let their son lose so much education. And he's trying to keep a production company going to keep all those people in work. And this is why I don't blame them for the decision they made.
No.
She was freelance. It was her that has given up her job.
Yeah.
And that is, that's true. We know statistically across the UK, and I think across the whole world.
Absolutely. I mean, statistically, women earn less than men. So, of course, if you're going to sacrifice a career to look after
it makes sense. It makes financial sense.
It's brutal.
In a sexist society for it to be the woman who gives up her job. But we've got to look at what has happened, which is that because of COVID, women have been forced back into the home. It's a completely retrograde period in women's, I was going to say liberation, but lack of liberation.
It feels very 1950s at the moment around our house.
Yeah.
But I think it's affected obviously all freelancers, men and women, have had a rough ride, and quite especially during sort of the first lockdown when people had no work and there was no government support for those freelancers. There was a lot of talk about, is freelancing in TV, is that a grown-up's job? Can you be a freelancer in TV and pay your mortgage? Can you be a freelancer in TV and have a family? Is there something that can broadcasters look at the support that they're giving freelancers? I know it's.
Well, I think this pandemic has brought that issue more to the fore, and we do have to deal with it. You know, I do know quite a number of women who've just given up, you know, and they go into PR, which, you know, for me is like being dead.
Well, yeah, or they, or they run, charitable organizations, or they look after their kids.
Yes, yeah.
Or if they're in production, they become talent managers, which is a great thing, because
Yeah.
you can be a bit more flexible with the hours that you're working. But does it we talk a lot about this kind of culture of presenteeism in TV. It's kind of who can work the longest hours, who can be
and
there.
I think a good thing about COVID is that there's no point in presenteeism, because there's nowhere to be present.
Although
Sometimes at meetings, I just lie in my bed. I switch my camera off and lie in my bed. And actually, I had a meeting with Alex Mahon. Not just me, there were a lot of people there. And I was lying on my bed and I actually fell asleep. And I woke up to hear Alex Mahon say the words Dorothy Byrne. And I thought, oh my God, what has she said about me? Jump up,
nothing.
turn your
I'm
camera
sure Alex
on.
was being scintillatingly interesting. I'm sure.
Yeah. Anyway, I think it was just a passing reference, but
so funny.
All that thing of being there first thing in the morning, last thing at night. Honestly, I think that will change.
I hope so, because I have to say, Dorothy, we're speaking to people who are working from home, and because there isn't that delineation between you're at home and you're at work. I've got people, edit producers, who are pulling 21, 22-hour days. They literally are just working at home.
Well, I think
all the time.
The broadcasters have an absolute duty. It doesn't matter if that person is freelance or not, to make sure that that's not happening. Channel 4, they keep telling us, if you work for Channel 4, you get these constant messages, make sure you take a break. Maybe don't have any meetings on a Friday.
That's great.
Obviously, they don't actually say, lie on your bed with your camera off when having large meetings. Eat chocolate every morning. But we are reminded, you must take a break. And I think we've got a duty to be passing that on to freelancers who are editing our films. I mean, I work in news and current affairs. Sometimes you have to rush a film out, but that is wrong.
It can't be the norm. I mean, I think everybody feels like they can pull an all-nighter on for a special occasion to make something really.
Yeah.
But it can't be. It's not sustainable in a long term. You can't make the workforce.
Well, and we know that people who work like that, there's quite a lot of evidence about people who work very long hours and people who work nights, and they live shorter lives. There's also evidence about pregnant women working long hours, and that, as far as I'm aware, if you are pregnant and you work long hours, statistically you're more likely to have a miscarriage.
I mean, absolutely. It's, and I think you kind of worked right up until you basically finished work on a Friday and gave birth on the Monday, didn't you? Something like that.
Yeah, but I didn't work late at night, and I asked one of my male colleagues to do all the night working for me. And to be fair, he did. He did all my night working during my pregnancy.
Good. I should hope so too.
Yes, I should hope so too. I've done a lot for that company, and that was really good of him.
Good. Oh, I'm glad. Yay for male allies. That's all it's all about. I kind of want to go back to, we were talking earlier about sort of the older women who'd kind of devoted their life to their career, and maybe, either hadn't wanted children or had kind of given up the idea of having a family in order to kind of devote themselves to work. And then where are those women though? Because I think you said on your McTaggart, as an old lady, where are the other old ladies? And I feel
this is one of the, I know several people in this position, so they didn't have children, or maybe had one child, but I know several people who didn't have children who wanted children. But then the hideous irony of what happened was that they were very experienced, so they were more expensive. So when, a director's gig came up or something, they were not the people who were wanted to do the piece of work. So they weren't really, they weren't really wanted. That's
they're
why
not
you
seen
should
as relevant, maybe, or maybe that they're not, hip, or
no, they were more expensive.
it's the money.
And actually, one of the things was, in our generation, we couldn't self-shoot because the union would never have allowed us to shoot. It was not permitted.
How interesting.
You had to have a camera operator.
Right.
So that generation, on the whole, couldn't self-shoot. And then along came all these younger people who were cheaper and could self-shoot and do the sound. People employed them.
Yeah, but I have to say I'm kind of anti that whole thing. I think quality. I think it's too big a job, I think, to be shooting and directing and doing the sound. And I don't know. I miss.
You can. Sometimes it works. Sometimes it doesn't work. But you do hear absolutely ridiculous stories of people doing. It's particularly when they're doing the sound as well.
Yeah.
And they've got to have a mic of a certain sort, and they're doing the camera, and they're asking the questions, and you think.
And then they drive afterwards to a hotel room,
Yes,
hours away,
yes.
and wrangle the footage, and then
And I think we're more conscious now than was the case when I was newer, about that thing of you work all day till 8 o'clock at night, and then you drive to the next place till 11 o'clock at night. And we now know that isn't safe.
It can't go on, can it? Really, really interesting. But yeah, I coming back to those older women, it's kind of a case of you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
Yes.
with kids, isn't
Yeah.
it? And it's and I wanted to come back to your you were talking about how that Channel 4 now has a menopause policy.
Yes.
I don't know if that was as a result of the conversation you had with Kevin Ligo or not, but has that sort of changed the way?
Well, I think actually, well, of course, Kevin, when I revealed our very interesting conversation that we'd had about the menopause, by then had gone to ITV. And we had a big menopause event actually after my McTaggart. And to be fair to him, I think they did send somebody from ITV. I invited him. He said he was very sorry indeed he couldn't come.
He's learned
Even
enough.
I thought might have been just a bit humiliating for him.
I don't think there's.
So yeah, that contributed, I think. But we've got this fantastic women's group at Channel 4. We never used to have a thing like that, and the Channel 4 women's group is just brilliant. And we organised a big event, and we brought doctors, and Alex Mahon came, and everybody came, and everyone really got behind it. So now all managers are to be educated about the menopause, and it's very important to educate women. There is no human being more annoying than a woman who says, well, I went through the menopause and I didn't have a problem. I mean, I'm really
Good for you.
greatly happy for you. Why are you telling me that?
Yeah.
I mean, so not all women have menopause problems, and we actually have to teach women about menopause problems because they don't all have them. And then the ones who do have them need to have lessons to be told, about more than half of women have problems in the menopause. So you are not suffering a personal problem. So if you're having hot flushes or whatever, for women, you often think that's my intimate personal problem. But if you went round your company, about half of the women that you're working with will be having that same problem. Quite often, actually, older men know because their wives are having menopause problems. So you can get an older man who knows more than an older woman. So, and then you need to be telling young women, don't want to depress you, mate, but it's heading your way. So you need to be educating everybody. And
yeah,
you
and to
need
recognise what those symptoms are, so that
and
you're
to recognise the symptoms.
Yeah.
And I would say potentially to go on HRT, because a lot of GPs just say to women, well, this is normal, you have to remain awake all night sweating because God made you like that type of thing. And actually we should be educating women. You should be going and demanding HRT. If you want it, you don't have to have it.
Options.
You need to know your medical options. Yeah. And then if you're having symptoms that make you feel really ill, then you're ill. And if you're ill, you don't go to work. Yeah. So a lot of women think, if I'm ill, I don't go to work. But if I feel really unwell, they wouldn't use the word ill or exhausted, or they might often use another word. But if I'm suffering problems because of the menopause, that doesn't really count as being sick. Well, yes, it does.
The symptoms are the same.
You can take time off, and bosses need to know that. And then another thing is that these problems can come on very, very suddenly. So you're sitting there and you're feeling fine, and then suddenly you feel incredibly ill. A woman might suddenly lose a massive amount of blood and it makes her feel absolutely awful. So you can go home suddenly, because you don't have to plan to be ill. You can be suddenly ill. And then you can also ask for fans and other things in the office. And again, lots of it is about talking about it.
That's what I was going to say.
I'm 68 and I went on HRT 6 months ago.
And is it helping?
My God, it's so much better. Oh. No one told me that if you weren't on HRT at the time of your menopause, you can go on HRT afterwards. I didn't know. So I've been waking up in the night, tired, etc. And I've gone on HRT and I don't wake up in the night anymore.
And sleep is so important for you to be able to do your job.
And sleep, if you don't sleep well, the statistical link between cancer and not sleeping well is established.
Oh, interesting.
Whereas women think, oh, if I go on HRT and I'm older, I'm going to get cancer. Look at the statistics for being on a very low dose of HRT. It depends on the person. But that's why you need a menopause policy, because you need to be talking about all these things. And then the other thing is that Bupa, I think it is, most private health providers don't include menopause problems, but Bupa has just started doing it. Right. And let's be aware that private health insurance is not provided by employers, because they're really sweet, kind people. It's provided because it enables you to get medical treatment at your convenience.
Yeah.
And also it helps to keep you going. So
Keeps
for
the workforce running.
example, yeah, I had a knee replacement. If I had had to have a total knee replacement on the NHS, I could have done that. That would have been fine. But because I could plan it, Channel 4 could bring somebody else in to be the head of news and current affairs. So it suited them.
It's so interesting, isn't it?
It's not a favour.
Yeah.
Don't think that all these things are a favour. They're to keep you as a wage slave.
Well, indeed. But I love what's really kind of coming through in all the kind of topics that we've discussed is this idea of talking, and especially of having older women talking to the women coming up below them. And, you know, I always thought that, you know, when the whole Me Too thing and, you know, the stuff that you talked about in your McTaggart, I always thought that if I'd had an older female mentor at work when I was a runner and all sorts of shenanigans were coming my way, if I'd had somebody there to say to me, you don't have to put up with that, and say to the gentleman in question, put it
Stop
away.
it.
Put it away.
Stop it, or I'll call the police.
Exactly. If I'd had that, I think that, you know, Me Too wouldn't have been such a massive thing as it has been in our industry.
Well, I definitely, you know, actually it was when some of this stuff at the BBC came out about Jimmy Savile, and it turned out a couple of people said they told their line manager, you know, and I came in and I said to the little current affairs commissioning team, should you become aware of a major sexual crime happening at Channel 4, by all means tell me after you have dialed 999, because these things are criminal offences, and men need to know, and we need to scare men, because there's a certain sort of man will only understand fear.
But I think,
if he's going to lose his job and get taken to court, he's going to think twice about bothering some young woman.
I think, I mean, I think it has got better. I know that the runners coming up, you know, now, I tell them about what happened to me when I was, and they're shocked. And I think it was very much, I think I'm really glad to see the kind of next generation of women coming into the industry more empowered and more sure of what is and it isn't allowed, and what's right or wrong, which I really am pleased to see that. I mean, what for you?
I mean, at the same time, their employment status is much less secure.
Absolutely.
And while you still have such high levels of insecurity and high levels of inequity, women will never be truly safe.
Absolutely. I mean, I do think there's so much tied into this freelancer model, this fear of never working again. You know, whether that is a fear of standing up to your boss saying, you know, I really want to do this show and I think you're wrong that you do, you know, whether it's a kind of creative.
I agree.
Or you know, just a fear of not putting in those long hours, or a fear of not letting your boss touch you up in the back of a cab. You know, it all kind of comes down to this kind of insecurity, I think. And people aren't freelancers out of choice in our industry, of course. You know, they're freelancers because that's how it is.
That's the way there is. But I think that everybody in TV has to get more used to the idea that people will disagree with them. I have to say, for Ian Katz, when he asked me to do this job part-time, when I said I wanted to leave, he said, oh, I don't want you to go, and I'll he invented the part-time job, editor-at-large, and he said to me, you're one of the few people who regularly disagrees with me.
Good.
And well done him.
Yeah.
I did say that's not hard, actually. But there's too much in TV of people agreeing, and a key reason for that is their freelance.
I think you're right. I think you're right. It's really interesting, and I wonder if that affects the quality of the programming of our product.
Of course it does. Of course it does.
Really interesting. I know I've been chin wagging at you for quite a long time, so I just want to maybe wrap it up slightly. I guess imparting advice really. To sort of, what would you say to kind of the women coming up behind you? What kind of words of wisdom would you say about, being in an industry that we love, I suppose, and how you stick at it?
Well, I can tell you what I've said to my daughter.
That'd be great.
Don't work as hard as I did.
That's really interesting. It takes a brave person to do that, I think, though, especially coming into the industry as runners. I think you feel like you have to be, the first one in, last one out, right? But you're right. It's about,
well, maybe as a runner, you're in a very tricky position. But unless we all change, that won't change. And the gender that will be worse affected by having to work too hard is women. I used to feel that even though I was a single parent, I had to finish my work at night before I could go home and look after my daughter. That was the wrong way around.
Well, I'm very grateful that people like you in those top levels, hearing that message coming down from the top levels, and I hope more people in those kind of positions hear that and agree with you, because I think that is the way to have a diverse workforce and to sustain people's careers throughout, so that we're not all, conking out halfway through. Exactly. Dorothy Byrne, thank you so much for today, for joining us on International Women's Day, and for all your pearls of wisdom and your humour and the joy that you bring us all when you speak. It's wonderful to meet you.
Right. Well, I've really enjoyed talking to you. Okay. Thank you very much, and good luck to your fantastic organisation.
Thank you.
Because it is much needed, and I will continue to support it.
Thank you. We'll keep fighting the good fight. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.